Welcome, Game Chasers everywhere, to episode 33 of the Collecting Confidant with your host, GunstarHero. And I'm back this week with something very unique, an indie game that I think a lot of people slept on and is now getting a physical release from one of my new favorite boutique sites, which of course will be VideoGamesPlus.ca out of Toronto. This is the Eternal Castle Remastered, which originally came out on the PC January 5th of 2019 and eventually got releases on Linux, Mac, Switch, and PlayStation. Of course, the PS4 is the only platform getting the physical release, which is available now via VideoGamesPlus.ca, and I'll be getting into those options later on in the video. But first, let's talk about what makes this game very special and why you should keep this on your radar, especially if you are a fan of late 80s, early 90s action-adventure platformers like Prince of Persia, Another World, and Flashback. This game will be right up your alley. So, the first thing that caught my attention when I was thinking of what to talk about this week were the graphics on this game. I saw the preview, the screenshots, and I was like, wow, this really looks like an old school PC game from the late 80s with a 4-color CGA design, and that was done on purpose. So if you are a younger viewer and you don't remember the old PC games, back in the day, before high-resolution graphics came about, we actually had a very limited color palette in our PC games. This was known as CGA, and it was essentially 16 colors that the computer could choose from, but only about 4 colors could show up at any time. So any of you back in the day who played some of the old Sierra Online games, or games like Prince of Persia, like I mentioned, you would have experienced these games in this style. But what's really cool about the Eternal Castle Remastered is that it takes the limitations of the old color palette and really makes some beautiful abstract art of it in terms of clever use of shadows, silhouettes, and outlines to have something that's truly unique, abstract, and almost slightly psychedelic. And it really is so much more visually appealing than so many other games out there. Again, I can't speak enough about what they were able to achieve with not only the beautiful rotoscoped animations, but just the level design, the incredible clever use of color. Albeit, if you're not used to this, it can be a little bit hard on the eyes, but because this is a love letter to that era, it's all done on purpose and intentional. And we'll get into some of the other quirks with this game, which, if you're judging this game by modern standards, may turn you off, but if you look at it in the rubric of a love letter to old 80s and 90s action-adventure platformers, warts and all, what made those games great, then you'll appreciate what the developers were trying to achieve with this game. And the development team was very small. It was actually 3 people. The principal developer on this game was Leonard Menchiari, who's better known for his 2017 debut, Riot Civil Unrest, and then more recently, Trek to Yomi, which I covered quite a few episodes back, which was a partnership with Flying Wild Hog. So Leonard Menchiari was the lead developer on the Eternal Castle Remastered, along with 2 compatriots, Giulio Perrone and Daniele Vicinanzo, who basically worked in a garage, brought this game to life, and the results for a 3-person team were pretty extraordinary, especially with the wonderful synthesized moody ambient soundtrack that was done by Giacomo Langella. So a lot of great elements going to this. Let's get into the game itself, and then we'll cover some of the history and development and why this game not only is great in itself, but from a meta-narrative context in terms of what it does outside of the game in terms of its place in history. And that'll make more sense once I get into it. So, back to the game itself. The game is described as a cinematic platformer action-adventure game. Again, very inspired by the old games like Prince of Persia and Another World and Flashback. Loosely in terms of story, the game is set a few hundred years in the future where the Earth now has become so uninhabitable due to climate change, pollution, and all that fun stuff. So now humans have resorted to inhabiting these extraterrestrial biomes outside of the Earth. And what they do is they'll send down AI via ships to gather materials and bring them back. Well, one of the AI never returns, so now you can pick either Adam or Eve, go down to the planet, find the AI, and bring it back. So what happens is, as you are heading towards the Earth, your jet actually crashes, and then now you actually have to collect 4 gliders to power up your ship, grab the AI, and return back home. So over the course of the game, you're going to be playing over 5 main worlds with about 20 stages, and it's very cyclical, hence the name Eternal Castle Remastered. So what'll happen is when you first crash land, that'll be the first base tutorial level, the ship wreckage site, where you'll learn the game's mechanics about running, walking, platforming, doing melee attacks, ranged attacks, and basic puzzle solving. Once you complete that first level though, then the game starts to open up into this semi-open world structure where you can actually pick which next level you want to go to, and based on the order that you play the levels, your experience will change greatly and could even possibly affect one of the many endings that this game has to offer. So what's also very cool about the fact that there's 3 main zones, there's the Unholy Church, there's the Forgotten City, and then there's the Ancient Ruins. Each of these 3 main levels have very unique play styles. And this is where it gets very interesting. So for example, in the Ancient Ruins, this game is more of an homage to Prince of Persia, where you'll be doing melee attacks, a lot of jumping, running, and very specific platforming. Whereas the Forgotten City becomes an all-out frag fest in the vein of like Mad Max, where you'll be literally kicking in a door and gunning down multiple enemies at a time. And this is probably one of the more bloodthirsty levels of the game. But then it gets a bit quieter in the Unholy Church level, which becomes more of a sneak stealth kind of scenario. So very interesting in how it forces you to change up your playing styles based on the level you're playing, and again, based on the order in which you attack the levels is going to change your experience, because you're constantly finding new items that will level up your stamina, your ability to take damage, and all these different attributes, so that definitely will affect your playthroughs. Then, when you finish these 3 levels and grab the 3 of the 4 glider parts you need to power up your ship, you will finally hit the titular Eternal Castle, which becomes this gauntlet of hack and slash, puzzle solving, and platforming. Basically, once you finish that final level, you'll get all 4 of your glider parts and return home. And that's the end of your first run, because this game is designed to be played multiple times. So this is where it gets very interesting too, because depending on the platform that you're playing on, the post-game can change quite significantly. I personally played this on Steam. So when I finished my first run, when I hit continue, I was sent back to the beginning of the game in a New Game Plus mode where I had to start going through again. But the interesting part about this is that unlike the base game, where when you die, you can choose to wake up next to your previous checkpoints, like these little monuments that you sit and meditate next to. And these serve not only to recharge your health, but allow you to return to a certain destination when you die. In the New Game Plus mode, if you die, that is it. And I found that out the hard way. I was playing a little loose and fast, thinking I could have gone back to a checkpoint, but about 10 minutes into my second run, I died, got my end stats, found out how much of the game I completed, how many times I died, and that was it. I had to start over all from the beginning. But what's interesting is I've heard that people playing on the PS4, when they went to do their second run, they actually went back to the save point before the final boss, and they weren't even sure if this was a glitch or intentional or not, because what's funny about this game, and again, what makes it such a wonderful homage, warts and all, to that era, is that this game is full of glitches. Sometimes I'll be pressing a switch and I'll end up on another platform above me. Other times I might die at a super hard, frustrating boss, but then I'll go back to my checkpoint, try the boss out again, and then they're super easy after that. I believe that it's not a fault of bad game design. This was done intentionally to kind of parody the fact that these old PC games were also very glitchy, buggy, could sometimes crash your computer, and the game actually plays on that. So for example, when you finish your first run, you'll actually briefly see a glimpse of your desktop, and then the game reloading again as if it crashed and it's restarting. So the fact that this game is very self-aware and glitches out is fun from a historical perspective, but also lends into its circular, eternal game design from the fact that based on the glitches and the secrets you can find and how you decide to play it, there are multiple endings to this game, because the game itself was designed to play like a movie. Leonard Menchiari, the lead developer, is a filmmaker by trade, and if you've ever played his games, they are very cinematic in nature, and he wanted this to be about the length of a movie, where if you want to speedrun it, yeah, you can probably do the game in about half an hour, but if you play it normally, strategize, and try to actually find the secrets, it'll take you anywhere from about an hour and a half to 3.5 hours. But like I said, because there's so many different ways to play it and so many different endings to unlock, your experience will change from play to play, and it demands replayability. So that's the game in a nutshell. Again, if you're into old school action-adventure platformers like Prince of Persia and Otherworld, you'll be right at home here with the mechanics, the puzzle solving, and even the purposefully kind of bad controls, which Leonard Menchiari in an interview said, I wanted to do that on purpose to make the controls a little bit stiff, a little bit unforgiving, but not too unforgiving as to make you frustrated and quit the game, but just to make you feel what it would have felt like to play one of these games back in the day, because overall, that was the intent of this game. It wanted to capture the feel of these old games, but now we're going to get into the very interesting history and development of this game in the meta narrative, because one of the other most interesting things of the game, outside of its striking visuals and very unique structure, is the fact that Leonard Menchiari and his team have created this whole fake history of the game. So apparently, there was an original game called The Eternal Castle, which of course this is a remaster of, that came out exactly 32 years prior to the release of Remastered on January 5th, 1987. And the story goes, and you can see this all on Steam, Leonard Menchiari actually posted this. The story goes is that when he was a kid, he had this game called The Eternal Castle, which he became a little obsessed with, and he played for hours when his parents weren't home because he had like a 1 hour per day gaming limit. And one day when he was playing it, he tried to remove the game and a piece of the disc broke off in his computer, so to speak. So his dad took the computer to get fixed, but the piece was still in it, and Leonard was left with this disc with a piece of it missing, right? So because the disc was useless, he eventually just threw it out, and the game got lost to time. But he never forgot the game and was so enamored with it that he decided to bring it back and try to recreate the experience as closely as possible, but with modern elements. And of course, that's going to come through with the music design, the game design. I mean, heck, even the post-game. When you finish the game, there's a Lost Tales section that you can unlock, which has two main features. Number one, there's going to be a duel mode where you can get into player versus player or player versus enemy duels, which is kind of neat. But the even better part of the post game is the sacrifice episode you can unlock, where now you play as this dog-faced samurai in a village, and it becomes one big level with multiple routes instead of different levels that you exit into and out of. It's just one big level that is played Souls-like. So basically no checkpoints. You're just going to have to go through gauntlets of enemies, creeping every inch, trying not to die. But then at certain points, once you've defeated enough enemies, you'll be able to, say, unlock a shortcut that when you die again, you'll be able to go through that shortcut and avoid this huge gauntlet that you went through before. Again, making it very Souls-like, even down to the point of when you die, you go back to a campfire. So that's where a lot of the modernity comes into this. But like I said, this game is so in love with the period it represents that even some of the worst aspects of the gameplay and design, they wanted to bring into this to, again, make it feel very authentic, which I think is very unique. And just when you start to get into like this whole meta narrative stuff, I just think it really elevates it to a new level of art. And they've even gone the full mile. If you go to lulu.com and look up The Eternal Castle, you can actually buy either a digital or a physical copy of the user guide for the old PC game, which is going to include actually some fun stuff like the layout of the graphic novel, giving you some of the story details and some game hints. So I think that's really cool that not only have they created a game, but they've created this whole experience outside the game and this whole narrative that they are totally tongue-in-cheek sticking to the story, which I find very humorous, amusing, and just awesome. So if you're into this game and you want to own it physically, you can only go to VideoGamesPlus.ca right now, and there are only 1,500 copies for the PS4 only while supplies last. This game is truly a treasure, and Leonard Menchiari, based on the quality of the work he's done, and like I said, this guy's a filmmaker by trade, so you can actually go see some of his video game inspired shorts that he did in the past. Most notably, back in 2011, he did a co-production with Valve called Half-Life Singularity Complex, which was this cool 8 plus minute video done all in first person with a lot of the assets from Black Mesa and Half-Life. Very enjoyable if you've never seen it. But even cooler than that, in 2018, he did a little short film called Neo Dusk, which was choose your own adventure in the style of, say, Black Mirror's Bandersnatch episode, but I'd say this one was even more effective in that it had multiple endings and is just a really cool lesson in YouTube design, but totally is a predictor of Leonard Menchiari's game design philosophy, where he's melding his love of cinema with games, and I truly am excited to see what he does next. Thank you for watching episode 33 of The Collecting Confidant with your host, GunstarHero. Make sure you like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one. Later, Game Chasers, and peace.